Before I introduce our guest speaker, our esteemed guest speaker, I just want to give some acknowledgement to my staff, Vera Davis and Karen Adams. You guys want to just give a little wave? They put a lot of hard work into making sure that you guys get information. The turnout is wonderful. So I just want to acknowledge your hard work and effort and thank you on behalf of the Community Relations Department. Right now, it's my honor and my pleasure to introduce to you someone who I know very well. He has the title of President of Milwaukee Common Council, but to be very honest with you, he has a lot of other titles with me that are very, very important. I mean, this is a guy who I've worked with. I mean, we have been in the foxhole together, in the trenches, trying our best to move this city forward. And it's been a lot of times where, and he'll attest to this, I needed help, and I went and got Ashanti Hamilton, and on the car ride over, I had to explain to him what I needed him to help me with. I mean, at one time, it was such an emergency. He remembered this. We were at a light at 27th and Capitol, and we had to get downtown to an emergency meeting, and the police pulled up on the side of us. They said, "Hey, Alderman, how you doing?" They said, "Man, we're trying to get to a downtown meeting fast." They said, "Get behind us." Turned their lights on, and we went through the city to get down to that's the kind of, I mean, this guy is a guy that you want on your team if you want to win. One of the titles that I really admire is his title as a father. I mean, he is an outstanding father. I saw his young girls grow up at City Hall. I see them growing into young ladies, and I see the effort and energy that he puts into it. So that's one of the titles that I really, really respect. A community man. I can go anywhere with this man, and all kinds of people know him. It's amazing. All kinds of people, little kids, old people, people riding on bikes, all kinds of stuff. Pastors, rich folks, everybody know Alderman Ashanti Hamilton. It's a lot of people who you can't say that about. But the thing that I really admire about him the most is just his integrity. It's a couple of times where I said, "Well, Alderman Hamilton, what if we do this?" He said, "Oh, well, that would work, but we can't do it that way." I think that may be the attorney part in him. We can't do it that way. Keeping us out of jail. But look, it has been an honor and a pleasure for me to work with him throughout my political career. It's an honor and a pleasure to call him a friend, a dear friend, almost like a brother. We're all interested in what you have to say, what your vision is for workforce in the city that we love, and that's why we invited you here. We're humbled that you took the opportunity and that you're honoring us with your presence. So without any further ado, I introduce to you Ashanti Hamilton, President of the Milwaukee Common Council.
My goodness. If I had known I was going to get an introduction like that, I would have prepared something to say. I can't tell you how good it is to stand up here. My glasses are broke, so I'm going to take these off. With this group and, in this leadership. Because I'll be honest with you. The only reason I ran for office initially was really to try to tear this thing up, right? And then you got to the point where you actually have some responsibilities, right? And being able to serve with somebody like Alderman Wade, it gave you the courage to fight for the stuff that you know you believe in without tearing things up. It's like you don't have to do that. And it's a story that stuck with me that when I was newly elected that he just hit me to early on. We came down here and we were fighting for resources for the community, and I had a plan for doing something. He's like, "No, you don't have to do a smash and grab." He's like, "Just take the knife and cut the piece that you need." Take the knife and cut the piece that you need. I got you. We got each other. So it was a completely different way of thinking about how to change a system. So, we were talking about, workforce development. The only thing that I could say to start this conversation off is that this is personal. And for so many of you, I know that this mission, this idea of workforce development is a personal thing for you. And the only way that we'll be able to have the impact that all of us are talking about is if we truly, truly make this a personal thing for you. Now, it's difficult for me not to take it personal because Earl knows this because he grew up in the neighborhood around where I grew up. Alderman Wade reminds me of this all the time. If we don't get this right, I got too many nieces and nephews that I'm going to have to continue to help support. And I don't make that much money to be spreading it out that far and wide, to be supporting that many folks. So y'all got to get this thing right because we got way too many people trying to support off of these little bitty salaries that we're trying to pass around here. So let's get started. I want to start with just doing something that Mark said. He said partnerships and collaboration, cooperation, right? Collective impact. We really should be saying those things constantly in order to deal with the type of problems that we are trying to conquer and to face. So I wanted to start off with you just sharing with you this idea of workforce development, because I think a lot of people use the term and everybody's not even on the same page with what you're talking about. And when, I grew up in the city of Milwaukee, so this is, when you say I'm a Milwaukee boy through and through. I went to Victor Berger Elementary School. Y'all don't even know what Victor Berger is. I got my Victor Berger folks over here, though.
Burger King.
It's now Martin Luther King Elementary. That's in the Harambe neighborhood. The Bader Foundation is building their new headquarters on the street. That's public. That's public now. I can say that, right? Right across the street. Sometimes you get information you're not supposed to say it yet. Somebody was just telling me something they read in the newspaper. I was like, they said that in the newspaper already? And I went to Samuel Morris Middle School. It's supposed to be a school for the gifted and talented. We was just there terrorizing folks. Then I went to Riverside for high school. Then I went to Marquette for my undergrad. So when you talk about, every facet, I got my Marquette folks in the back. I see them, they representing. Every facet of this community, I've kind of experienced through the avenue of education. And when I left college, I became a teacher. And I went back to teach at Riverside, where I had graduated from. And while there, people always ask me, why did you, want to be a teacher? You spent a lot of money on your education. Why did you come back to teach? High school changed the trajectory of my life. I was going down a path where I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I could have made some mistakes in high school that would have completely changed the trajectory of my life. I was involved in a few things that wouldn't necessarily should have been involved in, but I had some friends that actually got caught doing those things. Completely changed the trajectory of their lives. And because I didn't, and I was smart enough to wise up to stop doing it, keep doing it once you learn something, right? But because of that, I had the opportunity to make a change. So it was folks that were in high school that tapped me on the shoulder and said, you know what, you got some potential, right? If you did this, that, and the other thing, then you could actually do something. One of those people he was a coach. He was a football coach, and he taught a special ed classes. And he asked me when I was in high school what it is that I wanted to do. I didn't have any idea at that time what I would want to spend the rest of my life doing. And he told me to think about it. And the only thing that I could think about of something that I wanted to do, because my grandfather was a roofer, rough man. I didn't want to be working outside. It's raining. I'm trying to do that. I said I wanted to do what you do. I want to teach. I want to coach. It's like, man, if you want to teach and you want to coach, you're going to have to go to school and you got to go to college. And this path that you're on is not going to get you there. But I had somebody to tap me on the shoulder, try to lead me in a different direction. And so once I was there, I ran into so many kids, so many students who had similar experiences that I was having. But so many more were making those choices that would change the trajectory of their lives, and they weren't getting second and third opportunities. That net that was catching them was huge. And it was depressing. And it was at that point that I decided I think I need to go to law school. I need to try to fight against this. And while in law school, my first job that I had in law school, I was working at Burger King as a manager, but I got to be a manager because of what I learned working at Cousins and corn dog on a stick. I wasn't just going to make a few dollars. I was going to learn how they do the business. So I could have a full-time job as a store manager, and then I had this part-time job as a researcher at the Earl Carl Institute for Social Justice. And the topic that I stayed on for 3 years, this is my first time even telling this story publicly, but I think this crowd needs to hear. The issue that I worked on for 3 years at the Earl Carl Institute centered around reparations and the different forms that reparations could take. And most people, when we start having the public conversations about what reparations look like, people get caught up on this payment that people make, right? Like who qualifies for this payment, and who would get it, and how much would it be, and what's the debt that's owed, and who owes this debt? It was black people that had slaves too, and then there was some free people who were black that never were slaves. Do they qualify? How do you know? And what families took advantage of it, and what businesses were, these conversations just went off in all these different directions, and it was kind of my job. I was looking at this not only just in America, but globally, how these things work. And one of them were just centered around workforce development and providing opportunities, and how much resources would go into doing that. So I said, we really are on a path. We really have accepted the fact that we have had communities that have been disadvantaged in this community for a long time, and something needed to be done in order to correct that. It's really not a debate, right? The question is, what are we going to do in order to get it done? And so here we are in this room. So as we go through this, I want y'all to know that Wade did not prep me. And the only reason I have slides, I'm going to let y'all know this, I don't even do slides. The only reason I have slides is because my staff, Deb is over there and Arlisa is over there. They said, you're going to have to stay on point, so put something up there so that you at least stay on point. All right? So I'm going to stay on point. So listen, on this whole idea of why we are here and why we should take this personal, right? So we do this promise reporting at the city of Milwaukee. And we do this temperature of poverty in the city of Milwaukee. And part of that reporting is to take an inventory of the amount of resources that we're spending for the purposes of alleviating poverty, disparities, and inequity in our system. And this is one of the slides from that presentation. And the reason why I wanted to start the conversation off with this slide is because if you take a look at 1990 when I was in high school, and the percentage of folks who were in poverty at that time, and then you go 20 years later to 2010, which is a census process that, you know, both Will and I were part of the city at that time, went through, and you see the dramatic increase in poverty in general, and the steady poverty amounts for Black and Hispanic folks. That long-term poverty produces a condition in a community, right? And if we are not careful with intervening into this process, as you can see, everybody begins to slip further into poverty. It's not just going to stay Black and Hispanic folks or minority folks. Also, white folks are getting growing percentages in poverty, right? So let's recognize our common responsibility to each other. You know, I know a lot of people have been frustrated with the recent elections and what that means for our country. I think part of the reason is making arguments that kind of outline class warfare and not recognizing that you're the class that the war is being propagated against. So we need to be aware of the situation that we're dealing with. So the point with that is, what are we doing in order to correct it, and what's the work that's being done? Because that's the work that most of you are all a part of. So we just talked about the impact of poverty. So we got conditions in our communities that most people are actually focusing the conversation about the symptoms of what we're talking about, and they're not focusing in on necessarily what the cause of this is, right? So everybody's like, what's the cause of all of the homicide? What's the cause of the increase in incarceration? What's the cause of the failure of the school system? What's the cause of all of these health disparities? And at the base of it has been, you know, this whole conversation about poverty. So now, you know, we talk about the work. I want to talk about this intersection, right? So when we're talking about this workforce development, most of the time we have the economic development conversation. But really, a lot of the work that you're in is an intersection between economic development and social development, right? And so this cross between the two, and that's really where the work of workforce development lives. And if we take a look here, we did a resolution at the city in 2012, based off the research from the Public Policy Institute with public advocates. And they did this national study, picked a couple communities across the country, and put a couple things into place. They did a robust transitional job program in a particular area, increased the minimum wage to $10.10 at that time, expanded the Earn and Learn tax credit, and then had a tax increase for calculated a tax increase of what that impact would be for seniors and folks with disabilities who are out of the workforce. and then expanded the child tax credit, right? So, and when they did that, had a dramatic decrease in poverty. I see Rob back there because he was at Public Advocates when David Reamer and the crew, I think this is the Urban Institute was the one who funded it nationally. And so one of the things that we really picked up on here locally is this whole idea of the transitional jobs. And you know, I got to let you know that I'm a fan of the transitional job program. We, you know, that's one of the alignments that we have with a number of the organizations that we are working with at the city. We got UMOS on board. I know Ralph is here in the Urban League. They do the Transform Milwaukee program. And the whole idea of being able to have some entry-level work for folks, and I know there are some people who don't necessarily, they're not necessarily fans of transitional jobs, but we have to be able to have the mindset that this strategy works for some people. This shouldn't be the solution for employment for everybody, that for a vast majority of the community, that this strategy works. Now, this is going to be a hard conversation to have under the current political climate. But we got to talk about increasing wages, right? It's a very difficult conversation that's happening national. We've seen a lot of protests about you know, this fight for 15. So many advocates also you know, believe that, you know, this 10-10 scale is not fast enough. Where we are, we're a little bit further along at the city. I mean, we're probably somewhere around 1080 for what we're doing with the increment, and there is a current push to even try to make that scale go a little bit faster, but there's not going to be a way to have a large-scale impact on poverty in any community without having the conversation about raising raising wages. And the other three is something that really has to happen at the federal level. So I won't spend a whole lot of time talking about it, but there are so many people who could benefit from the earned income tax credit that are not benefiting from it. They don't even sign up for it when they do their taxes. That is work on the local level that we can do to close that gap. But at the same time, there are folks who are just a hair away from poverty that this should be expanded for, to capture that population, and it can have a major impact on our communities, because we should really recognize and dignify the fact that they're working, and they shouldn't be working and still have to be in poverty. And the same goes for senior citizens and disabilities, because you're going to have to subsidize the fact that when people are not working, that they are going to have to close that gap for those folks. And then expand the tax credit, because also with the same as the structure for the earned income tax credit, there are so many people who are just on the verge, who are outside of the ability to be able to take advantage of the credit, that will have a major impact on our communities. So, so what does that look like for some of the policies that we've been doing locally? So when we're talking about this alignment, so that whole package was actually introduced at the federal level, right? So Tammy Baldwin, Cory Booker actually introduced that package at the federal level, and transitional jobs have been something that at least has been, the tax credits in the transitional jobs have been something on the federal level that has been a bipartisan conversation, and we know that locally because that's also been a major initiative from Governor Walker's administration with this Transform Milwaukee dollars. So what we've done with those resources is created this Compete Milwaukee program. And in doing so, we had this partnership with Transform, with UMOS, with a number of the partners that we see right here in the room. And so we had our structure within that Transform structure. But what we also did was we put some resources to the side because we recognize that not everybody, you can't have a cookie cutter setup. So we put some resources into an accelerated program because there are some people out here. As we're discussing what this mismatch is between what employers need and what the connection should be with the skills that are out there, that some people don't need to be in a 6-month program, right? And you know, we've committed to paying the 1080, and oftentimes there's a need for this soft skill training piece. And if we don't have partners that are out there that understand the population that we're dealing with, that understand the end that they're that can give them the right type of support to get them through employment, that a lot of folks won't make it through the program, right? So we need people who understand the community that they're dealing with in order to be able to get them through. And we wanted to have a program that was flexible enough to have partnerships to actually do that. So I guess at the end of the day, we didn't even have to do the whole presentation. The only thing I needed to come up here and say is that we needed a coordinating council in order to make sure that we're able to reach the populations that we need, right? But one of the ways of being able to make sure that we can measure the impact of what it is that we're doing is having a place-based strategy in order to do it. And so we're taking off at the city with the promise zones. We are probably 3 years into our promise zone setup, but we want to tag on to the ideas that you all have talked about here about what's important, which is being data-driven. You got to understand the impact that you're having, and then have the community part of this process and have it be community-led. And then understanding that partnership has to be real, has to be authentic, and by and large, by looking across this room, that's pretty much what you were going for with this group, right? Being able to have that type of connection with the community to be able to make sure that where we are going with this, the community understands that, and the community helps guide and help to define what the needs are. Because as we talk about, you know, skill gaps between what employers are looking for and the skill set, and that whatever that gap may be with the community, oftentimes we are left a little frustrated in the community because there are many people who only need to be connected to those jobs, need to know where they are to take advantage of it. And then we got to have some people in the community that understand how to communicate to our folks to let them know that they just may not be ready and what they need to do in order to get ready. So as we started, this has to be a comprehensive approach. Nobody gets to sit on the bench with this. Nobody gets to be a cheerleader. Nobody gets to say, you know, I'm going to wait and see how employee get this done. The city has to be a partner there. And obviously, you know, as the work that I've seen happen out of this building, and also with some of your organizations, that there's a commitment to making this work, and by doing so, you know, there's a story that we must tell, right? That there's a certain level of dignity in work, and I want to tell you a story because I got into an argument with some folks about some resources that we just put into the budget to help McDonald's train some people, right? They came up with a training program that included the soft skills stuff, and And added to that, you know, I told you about my experience of working at Corn Dog on a Stick. It was at Northridge. I had the best lemonade that you'll probably ever had. But I wanted to learn about inventory. I wanted to learn about closing drawers and making drops. You know, how do I order for the next month? I wanted to learn those types of things. And with this training program that they're doing with McDonald's, they had a partnership with West Care at one point. Many of the young folks that were coming out of there, this is designed for young people, so we're not trying to get, you know, somebody that's trying to take care of a family to come through this, but this is for young folks. To go through this program, get the soft skills, and there were 40, 45 young people that came out of there, and then all of these stores are fighting for these guys because there was a different attitude that they had about service jobs. You know, it's a habit that we have of kind of demeaning service jobs, and then wonder why people who are in the service industry don't take the job serious, don't consider it a pathway to any career or anything else, because our collective conversation about the service industry and service jobs is so demeaning that it's hard for somebody to be proud about going to that job. And that's something that we want to change about through that process. And at the same time, that there is no lacking of dignity in working, as opposed to, because there are some adamant folks who are out there who just feel like you need to create your own job if people don't give you a job. You have the wherewithal to create your own job or provide services to your community without necessarily getting a job from somebody, which should always be encouraged, but it shouldn't be demeaning to actually work for, because even if you got a job and you had somebody working for you, I'm hoping that you would have respect for that person that got that job, right? So there's a there's a balancing act of being able to respect entry-level work, service jobs, and know that you can still cultivate this entrepreneurial spirit that's in the community. And knowing that that our educational system has to support this. We have to have a way for the educational system to match what business owners are looking for when it comes to how people need to be trained. And then that this directly has an impact on the health of the community. I'm talking both mental health and physical health. And this is something that Alderman Wade would say too, is that the best crime fighting tool that you have out there is a job. And this has a direct impact on what we allow to dominate pretty much our public discussion much of the time, which is public safety. And so if we take a look at that and being able to commit ourselves to taking this comprehensive approach, I think we can have greater impacts, shorter periods of time, because somebody just tried to convince me that it's going to take us at least 2 generations for us to get to where we need to be. I'm sorry, but I have children, and I'm not getting ready to pass a baton off to them, and I ain't even run all the way around the track. So we had Detroit here yesterday, and Wade is a fan of Detroit. One of the things that we talked about, and I talked a lot about with people in the community, was about how bad they talked about Detroit, and how, this was, you don't want to be Detroit. Hey, you keep doing that, you keep raising those taxes, you're going to be Detroit. And in such a short period of time, Detroit is making major strides in turning around their economy, empowering their community, and providing opportunities for people who live in that city to actually take part in the rebirth of that city. That they were here yesterday trying to explain to some of our business folks about what they did to turn around their city in such a short period of time. I don't know what the hell we waiting on. So, but one of the things in being able to do that, and you heard this earlier, is our commitment to measurement and a collective effort, that there has to be a sense of accountability and a shared common vision about what it is that we're trying to accomplish. And I think that's why this is so important, for people to sit in the same room and be dedicated to the actual work of accomplishing it, and not be afraid of reporting outcomes on that and holding ourselves accountable and being able to have a public conversation about what worked and what didn't work. Because the fear of evaluating that and only trying to answer a specific need of a grant that you may have gotten puts us in a position where it's impossible for us to make the adjustments that's necessary in order to continue to make the strides that we need to have the level of impact that the people in our community deserve, but they also are at a point where they're demanding it. And it's our responsibility to deliver. So thanks for giving me your attention. I don't know if I talked too long, but I'm willing to take questions if we got time. Yeah, you already know what to do. I see Carlisle over there. They probably hire more people nationally than anybody I know. So I know that the passion and the work is there. It's, you know, our ability to be able to be supportive of each other's efforts is something that can go you just don't feel it. It's something that vibrates in the community as well, right? So people understand when people get frustrated with systems, right? They've been frustrated with the fact that the conditions have existed for so long, and don't have trust that when they're going to an agency, when they're going to the city, that anybody really honestly cares about whether or not they make an impact on their life and change the trajectory of their life. And I think that if we have a common way of reaching out to the community in a unified voice, and give them the type of experience that shows them something different, that wake up by itself, you know, I hate to use terms like this, that can change overnight, but it can. It happened for me with somebody tapping me on the shoulder and actually putting a goal in front of me. It changed the trajectory of my life. And you see so many people that come through your doors, and many of them are in different stages of their lives, and they need different things at different times. But we have to have the skill, the understanding, and the willingness to make sure that it happens. So, thank you.